There is a very specific moment when a relationship quietly collapses, and most people do not even realize it is happening until the truth is already impossible to ignore. For Courtney, that moment arrived late at night inside her own house, when a simple glance at Colt's phone turned into a discovery that would destroy everything she thought she knew about their relationship. What she saw on that screen was not just a few suspicious messages. It was proof that while she had been opening her life, her home, and her trust to him, Colt had been building a secret connection with another woman the entire time. And once the messages started appearing, there was no way to pretend the relationship was still real. Stop for a second and imagine this. You open the door of your own house after a normal night out, and the person sleeping inside, the one you trusted, the one you were helping rebuild his life, has been secretly loving someone else the entire time. That's exactly what happened to Courtney. What she discovered on Colt's phone that night didn't just expose cheating, it destroyed every memory she had of their relationship. And once you hear what those messages said, you'll understand why this story left people absolutely furious. Courtney never walked into this relationship expecting betrayal. She walked in with loyalty, patience, and a genuine desire to help someone who seemed broken. She believed Colt needed support, stability, and someone who truly cared about him. And she gave him exactly that. From the outside, their relationship might have looked messy in the dramatic way reality TV romances often do. But behind the scenes, the truth was far simpler and far uglier. Courtney was investing everything into a man she believed needed her. Meanwhile, Colt was quietly building another connection behind her back. That's what makes this story so painful. This wasn't just about cheating. This was about a woman who opened her home, her heart, and her life to someone, only to discover that while she was helping him stand up, he was secretly stepping into someone else's arms. Courtney wasn't holding back in this relationship. She wasn't playing games or keeping emotional distance. She was fully present. She supported Colt during difficult times, gave him a place to stay, and helped him rebuild stability when he needed it most. But while she was pouring love into the relationship, Colt was doing something else entirely. Behind her back, he was sending messages to another woman. Messages that would eventually shatter everything Courtney believed was real. And the moment she discovered those messages, nothing between them would ever be the same again. Courtney did not walk into that relationship looking for chaos, humiliation, or the kind of heartbreak that makes a person question their own judgment. She walked into it with softness, patience, and the kind of loyalty that can make the wrong man feel safe enough to do his worst. That is what makes this story so ugly. It is not just about cheating. It is about a woman who kept giving, kept believing, kept showing up while the man standing in front of her was quietly turning her care into convenience. From the outside, it may have looked complicated, messy, maybe even tragic in a reality TV kind of way. But strip away the noise and the excuses, and what you are left with is something much simpler and much colder. Courtney was pouring herself into someone she believed needed love, support, and stability. Colt was taking all of it while building a second connection behind her back. That is the part that stings. Not only the betrayal itself, but the possibility that while she thought she was helping him recover, he may have been calculating how much more he could get from her before the truth exploded. What makes it even harder to watch is that Courtney was not holding back. She was not halfway in. She was not playing games, testing him, or keeping one foot out the door. She opened up her world to him. She made room for him in ways that go beyond romance and move into real sacrifice. This was not the kind of relationship where someone sends a few sweet texts and calls it devotion. She was physically there for him, emotionally present for him, and practically carrying the weight of his daily life while he leaned on her more and more. That kind of care changes the emotional stakes. Once one person becomes that, deeply responsible for another, every lie becomes crueler, every act of disloyalty becomes more personal, and every excuse becomes harder to tolerate. That is why this situation feels less like a cheating scandal and more like exploitation, wrapped in intimacy. Because if a man is broke, dependent, struggling, and being cared for, at that level, then the one thing he absolutely cannot afford to be is dishonest. He cannot lie and still expect sympathy. He cannot accept comfort from one woman while reaching for validation from another, and then act wounded when he is exposed. Yet that is exactly the kind of emotional sleight of hand that defines this whole situation. Colt does not just betray Courtney. He betrays the meaning of everything she was doing for him. And the worst part is that Courtney seems like the type of person who would have helped him anyway, even if romance had not entered the picture. Even if the relationship had remained something softer and less defined, she still comes across like someone whose instinct is to care. That matters because it completely destroys any attempt to paint Colt as a man trapped by expectations or overwhelmed by pressure. A man overwhelmed by love can still tell the truth. A man who feels smothered can still be honest. A man who feels insecure can still leave. But a man who chooses deception while receiving care is making a decision, not a mistake. He is choosing self-interest over decency. At some point, that is exactly what this became. Not a misunderstanding, not a blurred boundary, not a relationship that moved too fast for one person to handle. It became a situation where Courtney was investing in something real while Colt was preserving a secret outlet on the side. And that hidden outlet matters because it changes the emotional shape of the betrayal. This was not random temptation or a one-time lapse that happened in a moment of stupidity. This was ongoing communication, emotional overlap, and a second woman living in the background while Courtney was building a life around him in the foreground. Once that becomes clear, the whole relationship starts to look different. Every tender gesture begins to feel contaminated. Every reassuring word starts sounding rehearsed. Every moment Courtney spent defending him or trusting him now carries a painful second meaning. That is what betrayal does when it is revealed late. It does not only break the present, it reaches backward and poisons the past. Suddenly, the victim is not just hurt by what happened. She is forced to rewatch the entire relationship in her mind and ask herself which parts were real, which parts were performance, and which parts only existed because she was useful to him. That question sits at the center of this whole story. Was Courtney loved, or was she convenient? Was she his partner, or was she his shelter? Was she someone he cherished, or someone he leaned on until another option felt more exciting? That is the question that keeps everything burning. Because the more you look at the details, the harder it becomes to give him the benefit of the doubt. Courtney did not arrive at that suspicion out of nowhere. It was not created by paranoia. It was built piece by piece by the imbalance in the relationship itself. She was the one offering the home, the care, the emotional steadiness, the patience, the dignity. He was the one receiving all of it while still behaving like someone who believed he deserved more. That kind of entitlement is what makes people furious when they watch this story. It is not just that he cheated. It is that he cheated while in no position to demand anything from anybody. He cheated while being helped. He cheated while being protected. He cheated while living inside the generosity of the person he was betraying. That kind of disrespect is so extreme that it almost becomes absurd. A normal person would feel humbled by that level of support. A decent person would feel grateful. A self-aware person would at least recognize the moral weight of the situation. But Colt moves through it with the kind of selfishness that makes every excuse sound insulting. Because once a woman has been taking care of you at that level, the burden is on you to be transparent, faithful, and honest. If you fail at that, then whatever insecurity you claim to feel afterward sounds less like pain and more like manipulation. And that is the second layer of this story that makes it so effective. Colt is not simply dishonest. He is emotionally slippery. He has a way of shifting the focus from what he did to how he feels. He does something harmful, gets exposed, and then starts reaching for a narrative in which he is also somehow suffering. That pattern is familiar because it is one of the oldest tricks in bad relationships. Hurt someone, wait until they react, then start talking about your shame, your confusion, your fear, your damage, your unmet needs. It is not accountability. It is emotional smoke. It muddies the moment just enough to make the victim question whether anger is too harsh, whether empathy should still be available, whether maybe his brokenness explains the betrayal, but brokenness does not excuse using people. Insecurity does not excuse lies. Feeling unmanly does not justify humiliating a woman who has stood by you. If anything, his excuses only make the situation worse because they reveal how willing he is to turn Courtney's love into evidence against her. The very tenderness that should have made him feel grateful becomes, in his version of events, part of the reason he drifted elsewhere. That is not pain talking. That is a man trying to rewrite his guilt into a defense. Courtney, meanwhile, is left holding the emotional wreckage. That is another reason people connect with her so strongly. Her pain feels recognizable. It is the pain of someone who did not just lose a relationship, but lost the meaning she attached to all her effort. She is not mourning some casual fling. She is mourning the belief that what she gave had value to the person receiving it. When that belief collapses, the humiliation cuts deeper than the betrayal itself. She is no longer just asking why he cheated. She is asking why her love was not enough to make him tell the truth. She is asking whether he ever saw her fully or whether he only saw what she could do for him. That kind of emotional collapse does not happen all at once. It starts with suspicion, then confusion, then the sickening moment when scattered details begin to connect. The story reaches that turning point when Courtney comes back from a night out and the energy around the situation changes. Until then, there is still a fragile surface holding everything together. People may have concerns, there may be warning signs, and there may already be tension in the air, but the relationship still exists in that dangerous zone where trust has not fully died yet. Then, the outside voices grow louder. Her friends are not buying what they have seen. They are reading the situation with sharper instincts than the person inside it. And that is often how these things begin to unravel. The people around you spot what love has been trying to blur. That matters because it pushes Courtney toward the moment she can no longer avoid. The phone becomes the dividing line between what she feared and what she can prove. Once she decides to look, the entire story is already shifting. It is no longer about whether something feels off. It is about whether the evidence confirms the worst possible version of the truth. And when someone goes searching in that state, they are not doing it lightly. They are doing it because something inside them already knows peace is gone. So she enters that moment carrying dread, suspicion, and the last fragile hope that maybe she is wrong. Maybe there is an explanation. Maybe there is something harmless behind all this discomfort. But hope has a brutal way of collapsing when facts start appearing on a screen, because once the messages are there, once the words are there, once another woman becomes impossible to deny, it is over. Not only the illusion, but the mercy of uncertainty itself. And that is where the real damage begins. The moment the messages appear on the screen, everything changes in a way that cannot be reversed. A few seconds earlier, Courtney was still living inside a world where doubt existed, but certainty had not yet arrived. Now, the uncertainty is gone, replaced by something colder and heavier. Every line of text feels like another piece of glass sliding into place, forming a picture she never wanted to see. It is not just one message that catches her attention. It is the pattern. Conversations. Stretching back longer than she expected. Words that sound intimate, familiar, and far too confident for something that was supposed to be innocent. The tone between Colt and this other woman is not playful curiosity or harmless flirtation. It is personal. It is deliberate. It carries the rhythm of a connection that has been building quietly while Courtney believed she was the center of his world. That is when the emotional temperature inside her shifts from confusion to disbelief. Because cheating hurts, but discovering that it may have been happening for a long time cuts deeper. It forces a person to realize that while they were investing in something real, the other person had already opened another door and walked halfway through it. And the longer that hidden connection has existed, the more humiliating the realization becomes. Courtney keeps scrolling, almost against her own will. People often imagine that in these moments, the person discovering the truth immediately stops reading, throws the phone down, and storms away. Real life rarely works that way. When betrayal starts revealing itself, the human instinct is to keep digging. Part of it is anger, part of it is disbelief, and part of it is the desperate hope that somewhere in the messages there might still be a misunderstanding. But the deeper she looks, the harder it becomes to hold on to that hope. The conversations are not vague. They are not harmless. They carry a level of emotional and physical intimacy that cannot be explained away with friendship. Plans are hinted at, feelings are expressed, and the kind of language that should belong inside one relationship is being shared somewhere else entirely. And suddenly, the whole situation feels unbearable. The house she invited him into no longer feels safe. The care she gave him no longer feels appreciated. Every moment she spent helping him now feels twisted by the knowledge that he was giving someone else the attention that should have belonged to her. The emotional weight of that realization is overwhelming because it turns generosity into something he exploited. It is not only the cheating that hurts, it is the audacity of doing it while living inside the very space that Courtney opened for him. The walls of that home witnessed her kindness. They saw the effort she made to support him while he was struggling. And now, she is staring at evidence that the same roof that sheltered him was also the place he chose to betray her. That kind of disrespect is almost impossible to process calmly. By the time she finishes reading through the messages, the shock has transformed into anger. Not the quiet kind that sits under the surface, but the kind that makes a person feel like every second they spent trusting someone has been stolen from them. The betrayal is not abstract anymore. It is written in plain language, sitting right there in his phone. Undeniable and humiliating. There is no room left for excuses. And yet, what makes the moment even more painful is the way the truth reframes everything. That came before it. Suddenly, Courtney is remembering small moments that once seemed harmless. Times when Colt appeared distracted, when his explanations felt slightly off, when something in his tone carried a strange distance she could never quite explain. At the time, she chose trust. She told herself relationships require patience and understanding. She believed that supporting someone through a difficult period meant giving them emotional space. Now those memories feel different. Now they look like warning signs she ignored because she wanted the relationship to succeed. The emotional blow lands hardest when Courtney realizes just how uneven everything had become. She was pouring time, care, and energy into someone who was quietly dividing his attention elsewhere. The imbalance is impossible to ignore once the evidence is staring back at her. And the more she thinks about it, the more a single question begins to echo in her mind. Was any of it real? Not just the affectionate words, not just the moments when Colt reassured her that everything between them was genuine. She begins questioning the entire foundation of the relationship. If he could maintain another connection while accepting all her support, then what exactly did she mean to him? Was she loved? Or was she simply convenient? That question lingers in the air like a shadow that refuses to disappear. Meanwhile, Colt is asleep in the same house, completely unaware that the truth has already detonated inside the person who trusted him most. He has no idea that the secret he carefully maintained has already slipped out of his control. He has no idea that the life he has been enjoying inside Courtney's generosity is seconds away from collapsing. And that ignorance almost makes the situation worse. Because while he sleeps peacefully, Courtney is sitting there staring at proof that the relationship she believed in has been quietly falling apart behind her back. The silence in the house becomes unbearable. It is the kind of silence that follows the end of a story someone thought would last much longer. Every room suddenly feels different. Every memory inside those walls now carries a bitter edge. The trust that once filled the space has vanished, replaced by something colder and far less forgiving. Courtney does not need more time to decide what happens next. There are moments in life when clarity arrives so suddenly that hesitation disappears. This is one of those moments. The evidence in front of her leaves no room for negotiation. The relationship she thought she had is gone. The man she believed she was helping has turned out to be someone entirely different. By the time Colt wakes up, the illusion will already be over. And when that confrontation finally happens, it will not be a calm discussion between two people trying to work through a misunderstanding. It will be the collision between a woman who just discovered she was being used and a man who suddenly realizes that every lie he told has finally caught up with him. The fallout from that moment will destroy whatever fragile connection remained between them. Because once betrayal reaches this level, the damage spreads beyond forgiveness. Mourning does not arrive gently. It drags its way into the house like an unwelcome witness, exposing the kind of truth that cannot be pushed back into the shadows. The air feels heavy. Long before Colt even opens his eyes, Courtney has already lived through the longest night of the relationship, sitting with the evidence, replaying the messages in her mind, feeling the same wave of disbelief over and over again until anger finally replaces shock. By the time Colt wakes up, the balance between them has completely shifted. Only hours. Earlier, he was still living under the protection of her trust. Now he is walking into a room where every lie he told is already known. That kind of reversal is brutal because the person who was hiding something suddenly finds themselves stripped of control. The secret is gone, and with it goes the illusion that everything can continue as normal. At first, he probably senses that something is wrong. Anyone would. Courtney's silence alone says more than words could. There is no warmth left in the room, no softness in her expression. Instead, there is a cold clarity that comes from someone who has already reached the end of their patience. The moment he realizes his phone is not where he left it, the truth begins creeping toward him. That small detail carries enormous weight because it means the wall between his two worlds has already collapsed. The conversations he believed were hidden are no longer hidden at all. The person he was lying to has already seen everything. When he looks at Courtney, he is no longer looking at someone who trusts him. He is looking at someone who knows. And that realization is the first crack in his composure. Courtney does not need to shout to make the situation clear. The anger inside her is too deep for theatrics. What she feels now is not confusion or curiosity. It is betrayal sharpened into certainty. Every message she saw, every promise he made to another woman, every moment of intimacy he shared with someone else while living under her roof has already settled into place in her mind. The question is no longer whether he cheated. The question is how he could possibly justify it. But Colt does not immediately confess. That would require a level of accountability he has not shown so far. Instead, he falls into the familiar pattern that people often use when the truth corners them. He hesitates. He searches for an explanation that might soften the impact. He tries to understand how much Courtney knows before he decides what version of the story to tell. Unfortunately for him, the evidence has already spoken. Courtney does not need hints or half-truths anymore. She saw the messages. She saw the tone of those conversations. She saw the words he used to describe feelings that were supposed to belong to her. The lies are too clear for denial. So when she finally speaks, there is no uncertainty left in her voice. The betrayal spills out into the room with a force that Colt cannot ignore. She tells him exactly what she saw. She tells him about the other woman. She tells him about the messages, the promises, the things he said while pretending to be loyal to someone else. And with every sentence, the gap between them widens. For Colt, the moment becomes a nightmare he cannot control. The safe position he enjoyed inside Courtney's home disappears instantly. Instead of being the man she was caring for, he becomes the man she just caught deceiving her. There is no comfortable ground left for him to stand on. What makes the confrontation even more devastating is the sheer imbalance between what Courtney gave and what she received in return. She did not just open her door to him. She opened her life. She helped him when he was vulnerable. She supported him when he needed stability. She offered compassion without hesitation. And now she is standing there realizing that the same man she supported was secretly offering affection somewhere else. The humiliation of that discovery hits harder than any insult. Courtney's anger grows sharper with every passing moment because the more she looks at Colt, the more unbelievable his behavior becomes. He is not standing there as a man who had everything under control and made a reckless mistake. He is standing there as someone who depended on her help to get through daily life. That is what makes his betrayal feel so outrageous. How can someone accept that level of support and still believe they are entitled to another relationship behind the scenes? How can someone lean so heavily on another person's kindness while quietly undermining the very bond that made that kindness possible? Those questions burn through Courtney's mind while Colt struggles to respond. At first, he tries to explain. That is usually the first instinct when people are caught in a lie. They start constructing reasons, hoping that if they can just shape the story correctly, the damage might somehow shrink. But explanations do not work when the betrayal is this obvious. Every excuse he offers only sounds smaller compared to the scale of what he did. Saying he felt insecure does not erase the messages. Claiming he felt pressured does not explain why. He chose deception instead of honesty. Suggesting that he felt inadequate does nothing to justify humiliating the person who was helping him the most. Instead of reducing the anger in the room, his words make it worse, because the more he talks, the more it sounds like he is trying to soften his responsibility. Courtney hears every word, and none of them repair the damage. If anything, they confirm what she is beginning to suspect. Colt is not just someone who made a mistake. He is someone who consistently places his own emotional needs above the well-being of the people around him. That pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Even in this moment, when he should be focused entirely on the pain he caused, he keeps circling back to how he feels, how he felt insecure, how he felt misunderstood, how he felt like less of a man. The conversation begins to revolve around his discomfort rather than the betrayal itself. And that shift reveals something disturbing. It shows that Colt is still trying to reposition himself inside the narrative, even though the situation is clearly about Courtney's pain. Instead of accepting the full weight of what he did, he is searching for a way to present himself as someone who was emotionally struggling, rather than someone who deliberately chose dishonesty. That approach only deepens the fracture between them. Courtney listens for a moment, but eventually, the frustration becomes impossible to contain. She cannot believe that the man who betrayed her so openly is still trying to reshape the story. She cannot believe that the person she supported through his struggles is now standing there offering excuses instead of accountability. The anger that follows is not wild or uncontrolled. It is focused. She reminds him exactly what his situation looked like when she chose to help him. She reminds him that he was not standing on his own feet. She reminds him that while she was giving him stability, he was secretly building something else with another woman. Those words hit harder than anything else because they expose the hypocrisy of his behavior. Colt can no longer hide behind complicated explanations. The truth is much simpler than that. He accepted Courtney's care while entertaining another relationship. He benefited from her generosity while betraying her trust, and now he is facing the consequences of that choice. The conversation does not end with forgiveness. It cannot. Too much has been exposed too. Much respect has been destroyed. Courtney reaches a point where continuing the discussion feels pointless because nothing Colt says can change what already happened. When she tells him to leave, it is not a dramatic outburst. It is the final boundary drawn by someone who has realized she was giving everything to the wrong person.